couple months ago I started a segment called Animated Films for Adults, and I've been wanting to continue it, but for one reason or another haven't gotten around to it, despite there being quite a few films that I wanted to talk about. Originally this week was supposed to be set aside for Hoodwinked, but I've had this review partially finished for a couple of weeks now and decided to go ahead and just film it instead. Now I'll still do Hoodwinked, but it's going to be pushed back a couple weeks as the next couple of videos will be my Pirates review and a couple of Real versus Reels. Now, as you may have noticed, the segment has gone through a few changes, starting with the name, and I've decided that rather than just talking about films for adults, I'll just use it to talk about films that I want to talk about. And today I want to talk about The Triplets of Bellville, a film released in 2003 and directed by Sylvain Chomet. The film starts out with our protagonist, Madame Souza, who makes many attempts to engage her grandson Champion in various activities, none of which he's interested in. Finally, after discovering a book of newspaper clippings about bikes and cyclists, she buys him a tricycle, presumably because his deceased parents were themselves cyclists. This eventually leads him to participate in the Tour de France. During the race, however, he and two fellow competitors are kidnapped by the French Mafia, who plan to use them in a betting parlor where they've set up a machine that mimics the race and take bets on who they think will be the winning racer, while the loser Jesus. Madame Souza, along with her overweight dog Bruno, follow the kidnappers to Bellville. There they lose the trail, however they come across three aged jazz singers, the Triplets of Bellville, who take them into their home. Madame Souza joins them in an act where they make music with improvised instruments, and during one of these concerts they come across the kidnappers again, and Souza and the Triplets come up with a plan to rescue Champion. One of the things unique to The Triplets of Bellville is that it has very little dialogue. The film is, for the most part, not translated from its original French, mostly because translation is unnecessary, as there are only a handful of things said during the movie. This gives it a really interesting feel, like an old cartoon. A lot of people admired WALL-E for its lack of dialogue in the first part of that movie, and like WALL-E, that silence gives it a classic feeling. Unlike WALL-E, there is never a moment where that lets up, and that's not a disadvantage to the movie in any way. This film is at heart a comedy, and because of the lack of dialogue, it relies heavily on visual humor, and to its credit, that does not mean slapstick, which I have nothing against, but in some cases can be used as an easy out in films. In this case, The Triplets of Bellville tends to make use of its often absurd plot and its quirky characters to amuse and charm its audience. And charm is a key word here, as this film is full of it. I'd be lying if I said I got all French humor, as in the past my experience with it has been a little baffling. Maybe it's because the only French films I've seen are more on the artsy side, a good example being The City of Lost Children, a science fiction film about a scientist kidnapping children to steal their dreams. Pretty sure that wasn't supposed to be a comedy, but it kept doing stuff like this thing where they'd zoom in on Ron Perlman's character's little brother burping, and I don't know, am I supposed to laugh? Are you making a statement? Don't get me wrong, I like The City of Lost Children, it's a good film if you're into weird movies, it's just some of the humor, I don't get it. The Triplets of Bellville is not devoid of that, but for the most part, its use of quiet humor and visual gags is effective, and even if it isn't always laugh-out-loud hilarious, there was never a moment when I was not entertained. The stuff with Bruno, for example, the obvious joke being that he is overweight because he always finishes the food the champion doesn't eat. But even more comical is his compulsion to bark at passing trains, explained by the fact that as a puppy a toy train ran over his tail. This is a running gag in the movie, and I admit I never got tired of it. The stuff with the triplets themselves is also enjoyable. These characters almost plummet new depths of quirkiness, and the fact that they for the most part never say a word just proves that it really is more effective to show and not tell, and other companies should have no excuse to skimp out on character development given that this movie manages it very well without dialogue. There's a part when Souza's in the triplets' apartment, for example, and the triplets deter her from doing simple things like using the fridge or reading the newspaper without any explanation at the time, and then it's explained later when it's shown that they use these things as instruments. This is both somewhat amusing, and it's an example of how this film keeps its audience informed without ever having to rely on unnecessary exposition. Then there's the way this movie looks. This animation is gorgeous. One thing that grabs me is the line work, which is complex and intricate, as well as the use of colors in the background. I'm a painter myself and am always much more drawn to the use of many colors over a surface, as it adds a level of depth and complexity. These backgrounds make me think of watercolors, and watching this movie makes me long for them to bring back 2D animation in feature films, because honestly this is something you just don't get with CG. This film has a very unique look. This goes for the character design as well. The design of the bikers kind of freak me out a little, those bulbous legs and the fact that they all have that massive Adam's apple, but most of the exaggerations to characters is visually interesting. Madame Souza, for example, a short, slightly plump woman with oversized glasses and one platform shoe. She has a lot of character in her face and design, and it's always refreshing for a film to try something a little different with their protagonists. Then there's the triplets, also old women with their long, tall, thin frames. Between their behavior and design, these characters really do put a lot of animated characters to shame. This is not just limited to the main characters though, it goes for a lot of the other characters too, like the villains who always go around fused together in some massive shape that consists of two giant guys and one short guy smoking a pipe, or that waiter from the scene at the restaurant. The movie just has a very different look to it. Lastly is the music. The soundtrack is nice. I have to admit I think one of the scenes I remember best from my first viewing was the scene when the triplets and Souza meet.
Swinging Bellville rendezvous, marathon dancing doop-de-doo, voodoo can balaboo. Bellville stranger rendezvous.
What an incredibly catchy song. But as catchy as the song Bellville Rendezvous is, I wouldn't have minded a few more songs given that three of the key characters are aged singers turned improvised musicians, but I can hardly complain. The Triplets of Bellville really is something of a masterpiece. If you're the sort of person who doesn't mind very little dialogue in your films, I would definitely check it out. It's quirky, it's visually stunning, humorous, charming, and filled with interesting and colorful characters. Despite the fact that this segment is no longer constrained entirely to adult films, I still wouldn't say this film is for kids for a couple of obvious reasons. Still, if you have a love for animation, I would definitely check it out. This is probably one of my favorite animated films of all time, and even though it lost the Oscar to Finding Nemo, I'd still say it's worth a look at. Now, I'm not saying that it's better than a Pixar film, but I'm saying you could do a lot worse if you're looking for a movie up to those kind of standards. I'm the Animated Heroine. Thanks for watching.
Dancing, dip-de-doo.